Hey, ¿qué pasa, Mufasa? It's Brandon back with another video. So I recently shot a wedding with the A7IV. I got it all customized and dialed out, ready to shoot more weddings for this year. And I want to share those custom settings with you. And if you don't want to watch the entire video, that's okay. I could put a Dropbox link down in the description below so you can download my custom settings and load those into your camera, and that way you don't have to kind of manually do everything. But without further ado, let's get started. So the first setting that I have here on the A7IV is the shutter button. Now stock it comes with, when you half press it, it focuses. I actually get rid of that. So what I like to do is I like to have a back button focusing, and to do that I go into the autofocus, manual focus settings, and then we're gonna go to autofocus with shutter on the bottom here, and we're gonna turn that to off. So now when we have press our shutter, it's not going to actually focus for us. We're gonna have back button focusing, and I've always been used to that. I've had this, Sony A7IV set up like this for years, probably like 4 years now. And that's kind of how I'm used to focusing. So back button focusing, that's our first step. Alrighty, so then our next thing here is our custom one button. And custom one button I have set to silent mode, and you can turn that on and off. And for wedding days, I like to have this on, especially during like ceremonies when there's really intimate moments happening. And I don't want the shutter clicking. It basically turns it from a mechanical shutter to an electronic shutter. So now on top, our next custom button is custom button 2 right here. And what I have this set for is on our APS-C mode. So the new Sony A7IV has 33 megapixels in it, and now when we go into APS-C mode, it gives you 16.5, and I like to use that because, to kind of crop in a little bit. As you can see here, it just kind of crops into APS-C and it gives you 16.5 megapixels. I think that's fine, and it's usually better to crop in camera than in post, and that's kind of what I do. So I primarily use prime lenses a lot of the times, and so I don't have the zoom capabilities. So if I just wanted to zoom in a little bit, that's my zoom button, which is C2. Now custom button 3, I have that set to finder monitor select. And a lot of the times what happens is the little sensor on the front of the viewfinder, that's kind of what tells the camera to switch to the viewfinder or into the flip screen. And a lot of times if that gets covered with dust or fingerprints, it doesn't work properly. And so I have that C3 to kind of switch between the viewfinder and the flip out screen. Now C4, which is our trash can button. So that button there I have set to touch operation on or off. Now majority of the time I'm gonna have touch operation off. And what touch operation is it allows you to touch on your flip out screen and focus on certain points, whether you're in photo or video mode. And if you really wanna dial in a specific focus point, you can touch the flip out screen and it'll actually focus on the part that you touch. But a lot of times what happens is if I'm trying to, when I'm shooting with the flip out screen out like this, and then I go and I touch here to close the screen and I have touch focus on, the touch tracking starts, and it's just an extra step where I have to hit the center button to cancel it before I can actually start focusing again. And it's just kind of like this, like an annoyance. So I usually have it turned off, but I do customize a button to there where if I do need to turn it on very quickly and focus on something, I can just like hit C4 and then touch my point. So the next thing is our shutter dials. Now, if we go into our custom setup here and we go to the very bottom here, we're gonna have these custom, we can customize our dials. And what I have I have the front actually set up for shutter speed, and then I have the back dial here set up for aperture. And this is something that I've been doing for at least 4 years now. My very first camera was the Canon 5D Mark IV, and on the back was how you would control the aperture, and then the front was your shutter speed. Now stock, all the Sony cameras come flipped. So the front is actually for the aperture and the back is for shutter speed. But I've gotten so used to over the years shooting that way. And then the last thing here, you have this dial now on the new Sonys, which used to be the exposure compensation dial. Now this dial, you can customize it to however you want. I have mine set to still exposure compensation because that's how I shoot primarily in aperture priority mode. Most people, what are on YouTube, I've been saying is that they're assigning this button to the ISO, which is cool. I haven't done that yet. Really, it's the same thing. The exposure compensation is going to increase your ISO and decrease your ISO. It's pretty much the same thing, but you can do whatever you want. But I just left it stock. So the next button that I have here is AEL, which is, I've got that assigned to eye autofocus. And that's another thing that I've just kind of been doing for a really long time now. And I've just gotten used to it over the years. So it's under the custom settings on the first page. Under the rear buttons, it's button 1, and I've got that set to eye autofocus. And if you're familiar with the Sony cameras, you probably, I don't need to explain this, but you hit that button and basically it's gonna lock onto somebody's eye rather than just focusing on like their body or something. So now into our dials here, I leave the top one up, the up dial, I leave that stock, and that just kind of changes through the different displays on your flip out screen. Now your left button here, also I leave it stock, and that just kind of switches through your different drive modes. Now down here on the right, that's your ISO. That is also stock, so you can kind of change your ISO up or down. And then also the down arrow on your dial here, I have that set to white balance. Now my white balance, during weddings, depending on what we're shooting with, if we're using flash or something, I like to kind of have like a dialed in white balance. But most of the time I'm just shooting in auto white balance. I find that the Sony cameras, when you set the priority into auto white balance to prioritize white, it does a better job at white balancing rather than ambient or standard. I always use priority white because we're shooting weddings and we kind of want the wedding dress to kind of be neutral white. And so that's kind of why I do that. So our function menu, I leave it mostly stock from the way it comes from the camera factory or whatever, from the Sony magical land of cameras. Alrighty, so our first menu item here is our drive mode. And that again is just kind of standard the way it comes from the factory. Here, if you scroll over, we're gonna have our focus modes, and that allows you to switch from manual focus to continuous focus. I'm usually shooting in continuous focus most of the time. Actually, 99.9% of the time I'm shooting in continuous autofocus. Here it lets you shoot different areas, so you can have your wide, which pretty much focuses like an entire screen, and the camera is just kind of deciding what to focus on, like here, or you can kind of like go down here and just kind of focus on. There's no focus points that allow you to kind of decide on where you're gonna focus. And then most of the time I'm shooting in zone because I feel like that gives me the best, like quickest way to like switch between parts of the frame that I wanna focus on. And then if I really wanna dial in like a focus point, then I'm just gonna switch over to this expandable spot. And that gives me a little bit more fine-tuned way of focusing on something that I want, like a ring or something. If I really want to dial in and focus on a ring shot or something, that's kind of how I do it. Alrighty, so next thing on the menu is ISO, needs no explanation. Gamma display assist. So this is one of those things where we're gonna have it usually off, but when I'm shooting a wedding, I found that the A7IV is really great now for video. It's basically an A7S3 with 33 megapixels and a 4K 60 crop. It's basically the same camera. And so the video quality is excellent here. And so the gamma display is when you're shooting an S-Log3 or S-Log2 or all those picture profiles, and it puts on like a LUT and allows you to kind of see what the footage is gonna look like once you kind of color correct it and color grade it in post. And so most of the time it's gonna be off when I'm shooting photos, but when I'm shooting weddings, I'm gonna leave it on, and I'll show you why here in a little bit. We're gonna go on to this real quick, autofocus tracking sensitivity. Most of the time it's gonna be on responsive, and that's gonna give you the fastest responsiveness on your autofocus. It's gonna go boom, zoom, 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 zoom. It's gonna go really quick, back and forth, focusing on whatever you have. If you have like the newest version of the G Master lenses, you're gonna get the best performance out of that. Now, if you're shooting a ceremony, this might come in handy where the autofocus sensitivity, and this is new on the A7IV, is you can have it so where it's responsive, or you can have it where it's not as gonna focus on things that come into the frame. This comes in handy when you're focusing on, let's say, the couple, and most of the time the couple has the pastor behind them in the frame where they're talking to the couple and they're saying the sermons and all that stuff. A lot of times what happens is that when I focus on the A7III, I would focus on the couple, but then the couple's face cannot be seen, but the pastor's face does. So a lot of times the camera wants to do is it wants to focus on the face. Here with this locked on sensitivity, you can turn that, make the sensitivity a lot less. And when you focus on your couple, and you lock it on, the camera's less likely to go and switch focus to somebody's face or whatever. So it comes in handy for ceremonies most of the time. but most of the time I just leave it on responsive. So now we're on the second page, we're on the second tab tier of the menu. And this variable shutter, you can actually change and fine tune your shutter to be very precise. And this comes in handy. Now this last wedding that we shot, I didn't really use it. There's a venue that we shoot at pretty frequently, and the thing that really gets us a lot of the times is the chandeliers that are above on the dance floor. We have to pretty much set our shutter to like 1/200th of a second, I think, or 1/250th of a second, I can't remember right now, in order so that our photos are consistently exposed. Because the shutter, if you're like at any other different shutter speed, the chandeliers are just going to be, I don't know what the technical term is, but you're going to have photos that are light and then dark, where and so what this does is it allows you to fine tune that even more to kind of be in sync with the chandelier lights and stuff like that. And so that's a pretty cool feature. Now this picture profile is the next tab that I have here. And now here what I have picture profile because I've been shooting this last wedding that we did. I shot a bunch of video clips throughout the weddings, but I was primarily there to shoot photo, and we have our videography team there to do videos. But you know me, I like to shoot a lot of videos and stuff. So I have picture profile here. So what I can do is I can just hover over it and switch really quickly by hitting the dial and switching over to picture profile 1. And what I have picture profile 1 set to is I have it at S-Log3, got S-Gamma3.Cine, and we got our detail to -7, the usual stuff. And what that does is now once I'm in picture profile and then our gamma display, remember the gamma display that we had is on, now I can just hit the record button, and now I'm shooting 4K, 422, 10-bit, very in S-Log3, and that switches very quickly. So I can record my clips really quickly. I'm just gonna record like really quick this clip here, hit the record button, stop recording, and then if I wanna go back to taking pictures, all I do is hover over my picture profile, turn it back off, and then I can resume taking photos. And so that's kind of the workflow that I was using this last wedding. Unfortunately, when you have S-Log3 set up in video mode, it transfers over to your raw files on your picture profile. And so that's kind of the workflow where I have to turn on S-Log. That's the quickest way I found, where I can turn on S-Log and then I can turn it off in between taking photos and video. That's just the workflow. I wish we can have a feature where it's separated, where you have S-Log3 turned on in video, and then you can just pretty much take your photos, and then when you hit the record button, it switches everything over to S-Log. Maybe one day that'll happen, but if you're a hybrid shooter or somebody like that, that's kind of the workflow that I found works best for me. White balance here, we have that set to auto white balance. Steady shot, we can turn that on or off. I always have it on because that's just kind of what we do. Image quality here, we're shooting in RAW, and then one of the other things that's cool about the A7IV, it has a dual card slot, so whenever I have those set up for simultaneous recording for both photo and video. So if I have a memory card that fails, I've got a backup already recorded onto the second card. With weddings, you really got to be careful when you're dealing with clients' files and stuff, because you don't want to make that really awkward and terrible phone call to a bride that said, hey, I lost your footage because it wasn't dual recording, or I had an SD card fail or whatever. So that's kind of how I have that, set up. Anyways, I hope this video helps you. Again, the files, if you don't want to kind of go through your camera settings and everything, I'll put the files down below. Anyways, guys, I hope this video helped you out. I hope you found it useful. Get out there and go shoot the new A7IV. It's really exciting. Got a lot more content on the A7IV coming soon. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.